Casey's is a premier garden center and gift shop located in Lawrenceburg, Indiana. Casey's offers a wide selection of plants, landscaping materials, home and garden decor, and gifts for every occasion. Casey's is committed to providing exceptional service, a unique shopping experience, and value to every customer. Stop in and see what makes Casey's so unique. Located at 21481 State Line Road, Lawrenceburg, Indiana, or call 812-537-3800. Let Casey's help you add beauty to your home.
Hey guys, what is going on? Welcome back to another show, another episode here with Merle. That wasn't very exciting, was it? Welcome back. How you guys doing?
Man, there you go.
Now we're
go.
Live action here. Anyways, how you doing today, Merle?
I got a cold.
You got a cold?
I got a cold.
So I come walking in, and Merle's got this can, and I didn't see the label on it. And I was like, "What are you drinking over there, bro?" I thought you were.
It's called Kroger Seltzer Water.
I wasn't sure what you were drinking. I was like,
Yeah,
"Man, it's gonna be a good show."
You thought I was hitting it early. Yeah, that's great. Yeah.
So what's going on? We had our golf outing we talked about. I was very excited to get you out there this year. We got you out for the first time.
First time this year.
I thought it was a lot of fun. We
had a pretty solid foursome.
We did. We had a
and
good.
I was the weak link, but even come on, I don't want too much praise, but I did embarrass myself.
No, I thought you did just fine. I love it that you caught the bug again this year. You were talking about buying a new driver, Linda.
That's the worst part about golf. You could have like 100 miserable shots, but you get one that you feel like you could be on the PGA. And you're like, oh yeah, I got to go back out and do it again. But we did really well. I mean, if we could have, woulda, shoulda, coulda, right?
Yeah.
If we could have sunk a few of those putts, we would have been right in the mix.
I think so.
We
We
end up 10 under.
We were 10 under, yep.
And we honestly, we had plenty of opportunity to be 15 or so under.
Yep.
Between you, Travis, and Petey, you guys can hit the ball.
It was fun. It was a good time.
It was good.
Anyway,
all right.
What we got going on today?
So I got a question for you.
Oh boy!
If you could have a time machine, time machine. I'm not much into sci-fi stuff or anything like that, but just imagine for a second you had a time machine. All right?
Wasn't it the Winslows? They had a time machine, didn't Steve Urkel? Didn't he? He did. I'm just.
I don't know. That's
any of you '90s kids. Anyways, continue.
All right. So if you jumped in that time machine and you kind of hit the send back button, what would you go back and tell the younger version of yourself?
Ooh.
All right. So you're going to hit it and you're going to show up. And I don't know, maybe you're going to be 12, 13, 14, 15 years old. What's Kyle today going to tell Kyle of 20 years ago?
Oh, well, I would probably start off by telling him he would eventually grow. So
yeah.
I was a shrimp. I was tiny. So I came in my freshman year of high school, 5 foot tall, 100 pounds.
So there's hope for my young son.
Yeah, maybe. So then I graduated 6 foot tall, 140 pounds. So I grew a foot in high school. So I think the first thing I would tell my young self is one day you will grow. Because I was always the small guy. So
did that bother you a lot growing up? Like, did you I just wish I would grow, or did you just not really think about it?
No, I was really into basketball, and I would always see these guys, these center position. I'm like, man, if I had half their height, I would do so much.
Yeah.
I would start off by telling my younger self, one day you will grow. But if I was like to really get into the weeds and like really give some good advice to myself, I would probably tell myself that being in the minority when it comes to taking a stand for something is a good place to be. So this is something in my venture in the fire world. I take a pretty bold stance when it comes to what I do, and I get a lot of critics because of that, and I get a lot of naysayers and people who try and talk behind my back, and I'm okay with that because I know where I stand, and I have a moral compass and a stance that I stand for my profession, and I take it very, very serious. And there's a lot of naysayers out there, so I would say, yeah, if you have critics, that's a good thing.
So I want to be clear. So you're saying even when you were younger that you would avoid standing strong on something.
Yeah, because I was a people pleaser. I wanted to kind of fit in with I wanted to be the popular kid, and that was kind of something I strived to do. And now I'm very comfortable in my own skin, and I know where I stand. And if you like me, great. And if you don't, that's okay. Everyone's entitled to their own opinion. So.
Right.
So yeah,
Yeah.
that's what I would tell my younger
Yeah.
self.
Okay. So just being a little bit more okay with who you are
Absolutely.
and taking a stand.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I like it.
Yeah.
What about
Well,
you?
you probably would have never married your wife then, because she would have thought, I don't need this guy. He's a little too mouthy.
Yeah, probably. I tricked her when we were still in high school, so she didn't know any different.
Yeah. Yeah.
What about you? What
Well,
would you
it's kind
tell
of funny. I don't use the same words, but I think it really is a lot of the same deal there. Like, I was a decent athlete. I had lots of different friends. Not like, I wasn't the most popular, but I knew a lot of people in the class.
Okay.
But I don't think I was very bold in standing up with confidence for things.
Okay.
And so that boldness, and I think a lot of it because I had a lot of self-doubt more on the intellectual front.
Gotcha.
Like I wasn't smart enough to be able to argue and stand for certain things. And I felt like, I always had to be the smartest. And I've come to, over the years, and I've even mentioned this in the show, that I fell for the world's view on what smartness is. And for me, smartness was really what kind of grades you're making in the primary academics, reading, writing, arithmetic.
Sure.
And I've come to realize that some of those people who did really well in those areas are so dumb in so many other areas. But I gave them so much credibility.
Yeah.
Right? And I don't mean to take away from them as much as I never gave to myself.
Sure.
Because I did carry a lot more common sense. I carried a lot more social skill than a lot of these folks. But I always dismissed that like, well, I really don't know what I'm talking about.
Sure.
So I wish I would have been more bold.
Okay.
Kind of like what you're saying there, to just stand up for things and not second guess myself.
Yeah. So now that we've kind of established that, what does that look like for our show today? What are we going to get into?
So we are going to talking about like giving advice,
Yeah.
right? Giving advice and seeking advice.
Okay.
Because I think it is amazing to me, the guys that come into my office for coaching, obviously, like I don't use the word advice much at all, but if you boil it down, that's a lot of why they're there.
Sure.
And so I don't really feel like I'm worthy of giving a lot of advice. I mean, I don't know, like that's some super sage guy, But when I see guys coming in, I see a lot of this of me in them in terms of self-doubt and just questioning and wondering like how did we get there? And so we're going to talk today about when do you go ask for advice? Who do you go to for advice? What kind of advice do you seek? Because I think when you get a clearer vision for that, you just go right to it and get it done versus wondering if you should.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. I like it. I think it'll be a good show. Before we do, let's thank our sponsors real quick. Thank you so much for Kramer's Beer House for coming alongside of us. The Kramer's Beer House located down on Route 128. Kramer's Beer House been a big supporter of our show. Really do appreciate them. Check them out. Let Mark know we sent you down there.
All right. Also, thank you to Casey's Outdoor Solutions for being sponsors of Strong Dad's podcast. Just thanks for all that they do just for the community and supporting the efforts to make our community better. So we want to thank Casey. If you get a chance, go down and see him at Casey's Outdoor Solutions, located outside of Lawrenceburg, Indiana. All right. So, one of the things that when I was putting this show together, I thought about the idea of whatever advice I would give my younger self is really still the advice I would give me and I want to give me today.
Yeah.
Because, I think if the advice was good for 20 years ago, good advice is always good advice. You know what I'm saying there?
Yeah.
And so I think the idea here is when we seek good advice transcends time. Right? It's not just like, well, based off my mood or my feeling today, this would be the right decision. But in a different mood, maybe this would be the right decision. Does that make sense?
So then with the idea of, all right, so good advice, when we dive into that, and I like that, the idea that good advice should stand the test of time. I also think, and maybe this goes back to the advice I would tell my former self, like if that's how someone feels and that's okay, how would we approach someone? Because I'm sure there are people that 20 years ago, the advice that they may give because of the social because of the way society has transformed in the last 10, 15, 20 years, how would that advice look to someone? So if I was to go back and tell myself 20 years ago something completely different besides what I originally said, and now that is not exactly a in the social eyes,
right,
be seen as a good advice. What do you think about something like that?
Well, this is where I think it gets interesting. Most of us think that, the world is so different today than it was 10, 15, 20, 30 years ago. And in some aspects it might be, like with technology and that kind of thing. But in terms of good advice doesn't change that much, right? Like if something was a good investment at one point, it probably is still a good investment at another point in time. And if it's not, then it probably wasn't good to begin with. I'll give you an example. So early on, I had a gentleman. I say early on, I'm going to say this was probably late 90s. I had a gentleman reach out to me. He actually was a past friend of mine. He reached out to me out of nowhere, and he was into one of these multi-tiered pyramid schemes is what we would call them. But the idea of, hey, if you get in and buy now, and then you get 5 guys under you to buy, and then they'll start, money will filter back into you. If you get into this now, within, X number of months or years or whatever, you're going to have millions,
Yeah.
And my dad always said, if it's too good to be true, So he was kind of that way. And so without really putting a lot of thought into it, the whole thing sounded fishy to me. But I just said, listen, if it's a good investment, it should be a good investment either today or a year from today.
Yeah.
In other words, if it's good quality, it should always be good. Not just because the whole pitch was you got to get in now. And so there was this external pressure, like an artificial pressure. You've got to get in now.
Sure.
And because he was grabbing the emotions. And I told him, I said, listen, I'll wait a year. And if you're still out doing it and you're making money, I'll be a year behind you, but I'll jump in.
Sure.
He wasn't 6 months down the road. He wasn't even doing it any longer. And again, I don't take away from him as much as because he was excited about it. Somebody did that to him. But the whole deal is good things are always good things.
Yeah.
Right. And they're not as time sensitive as we think they are. Well, it's just different now. And God's word is a perfect example of that.
Yeah.
Whether it was today or 2,000 years ago, God's word is always good. And we like to buy into the idea that, well, no, I think it was old-fashioned. Back in those days, it may have worked, but not anymore. And that's just not true.
Yeah.
It's not true.
So with that idea, would you say there's a difference in, giving the good advice versus being like wise advice? Do you think that those coincide? Because if I'm asking someone for advice, maybe in a financial thing, to me that looks different than if I ask someone, if I'm asking someone who's been a believer in Christ for 30 years, like what does following Christ look like now versus when you were 20 years old, and to me that I'm looking for wisdom in that versus like a financial advice, I guess. Do you see a difference in wisdom versus advice?
Oh yeah. So let's go back to the money. So I always feel bad for the young guys, the guys who are 30 or younger, and they're trying to be financial advisors. Okay. Because I'm not ready to take advice from a guy who's, because he may know all the book stuff. Yeah. He may know all the programs and products and everything that are out there, but I want to see how he's ridden through the test of time. And so that's where like my financial guy is my age or, maybe a little older. Yeah. And so I've always, when I sought out financial advice, I've always sought those who were older than me at least, because they've got the wisdom part versus just the book part.
Yeah.
And so I think the good advice is full of wisdom. Yeah. If maybe we could say that.
Yeah.
And this has nothing to do with how smart your advisor is, or in this case, all right? Like they could be totally smart and they could be totally accurate on whatever they're giving. But if I'm going to really dig into information and I want to make a wise decision, a smart decision, I want to tap into somebody's wisdom.
Yeah. And isn't it ironic though? Sometimes we, just not necessarily challenging what you just said, but I do think, because I see myself sometimes, like if I'm getting a job done at my house or something, I want the guy who looks like he's been around the block once or twice, right?
Right.
But I also think there is a little bit of caveat to that, in the sense of, just because you've been around the block once or twice doesn't mean that you're necessarily wise. And
right.
I think in a lot of ways, myself included, sometimes we see wisdom as age. And it's not always the case. And this is a perfect example. In my world, in the fire service, there are a lot of guys who have been around a long time.
Yeah.
They've been in the fire service. They've seen a lot, right? And yes, we do go to those guys for wisdom and like, hey, how would you respond in this? But in the same sense, sometimes those guys who have been around the block once or twice are not always the ones willing to give that advice. You kind of almost have to pry it out of them sometimes. And so yes, I do think with age comes wisdom, but also with age sometimes comes a little bit of stubbornness that doesn't allow you to want to give some of that advice back. And so I think it's definitely a balancing act when we talk about giving advice, and we talk about this idea of who do we seek out for advice. I do think there is something to be said about someone who has been around the block once or twice. But I also think somebody who is my age, I do think I can impart some type of advice to somebody. It's going to look a lot different. Maybe presented different. Obviously, I think I could probably relate to a fireman that's getting into the trade right now better than someone who Rich Yorshesky. I know I've mentioned his name before. Someone I looked up to for a long time. He had 30 years in the fire service. He just retired. I could probably relate to that guy who's getting in the fire service now better than Richie could.
Right.
Not to say what he has, his experience means. I mean, it means a lot. But I think, when we talk about this idea of advice and wisdom, I think there's definitely a balancing act, because I think I think different situations call on different advice from different people.
Yeah. I think a big part is just always recognizing that the youngest generation always believes they're the smartest generation. And again, that's the pride and arrogance that is natural for that age, right? But I think the truly smart young generation folks are also very coachable. When they go, yeah, you know what, I do, because I have the energy and I'm still very smart and want to think things through, but I still want to tap in to the guy who's already walked through this field.
Yeah.
And so, man, that's a great place to be, because you do have that energy. And that's what we used to see that all the time in the education world, where you'd get new student teacher types that would come out of college, and they had great ideas. They've just been reading recent research. They have all of this enthusiasm, and you want to take that, but then you want to also have a little bit of humbleness with that.
Yeah.
Because then they get in a class with a master teacher who says, yeah, I know what your textbook says, but watch this.
Yes.
And they just conduct a classroom. Versus, like you said before, there's some of those master teachers that are just mastering being dead and standing up, right? Yeah. Like because they've lost the enthusiasm, yes. They've lost the energy. So there is that middle ground of trying to find somebody who's still got the freshness, but still. And I'll say, Kyle, I think you are really coming into a really neat age in your career, because that's now you've got some time under your belt. You've done a lot of different practices. So you've done that, but you've got the wisdom now starting to creep in there. And so your best teachers are your folks that are between, the early 30s to the early 40s. Yeah. Because those guys, they've got all the good combinations together.
Well, and I want to back up to something you just said, Merle. I think it's a great place, as we kind of move through this show. One thing you had said, this idea of being coachable. When it comes to this idea of seeking out advice and also receiving advice, man, I think my generation, and I'll speak just because I'm part of this generation, I think my generation does a terrible job of, we hear the advice a lot of times, we're asking for advice sometimes, but I think we do a terrible job of just that, not being coachable, taking that advice and realizing that okay, maybe not everything that person said can apply to the situation, but man, there's got to be some good little nuggets. We talk about nuggets all the time in the fire service. Like you go to a training and those guys that are teaching, man, I'm not there trying to figure out, I'm not trying to take the whole pie, right? I'm just looking for these small little nuggets that I can take back with me and then apply it to what the Dayton Fire Department looks like. So I think with this idea of advice, a great place to start is when you're seeking out or giving advice, man, there's got to be that humbleness that comes along with it, that realizes you're seeking advice, or someone is giving you advice because they've been there, that they do have a little bit of wisdom that they can impart on you. But if we just dismiss it because, that old hag, he doesn't know what he's talking about, then we're missing out. That's one thing that I struggle with in the fire service because, man, I want to know what those guys have been in the fire service for 30 years. I want to know everything that they want to tell me, right? But if I were just to say the fire service looks completely different 30 years ago than it does today, and I completely dismiss them, then man, I'm losing out on so much good advice and so much good wisdom.
Yeah. I mean, I just the way it's tempered, right, with that wisdom, I think is important. So the idea here, and moving through, like, okay, how do I get advice? How do I seek advice? We're really talking a little bit about marrying the old and the new together. They both have a place, and that's why, like, even in our church setting, I've gone to churches before where it's nothing but young people. Yeah. And I've come to realize at that time when I was visiting my son in one particular case, the oldest person, I was visiting, so I was the way oldest person. Yeah. But the oldest person in the room was lucky if they were 30. Yeah. And I'm listening to their conversation. I was then attending, we did a church service, and then I did a Bible study with them. And I'm talking about some smart people here, okay, in this particular group. They were, like, definitely achievers. But even though they were so smart, I was hearing very little wisdom. None of them had the life experience. And I just thought, I don't think I could ever belong to a church that doesn't have a mix of the old and the new together, because that's the blessing of having that. Like, you don't want to kick the old to the curb or throw the young out the door because they're arrogant. You really want to work that mix together. And so, the deal here is learn to get your advice through the mixture of the old and the new. Don't shun either one.
Yeah. So as we do that, so we're looking at the seeking advice. What are some recommendations you would kind of impart some wisdom, Merle?
Well, all advice. I mean, I think this is really important because this is where, like, the pyramid scheme on the money really can get a guy in trouble. Okay, so the get rich quick scheme that we sometimes run into, like, that could sound so good. And so there are a few basic things that every man needs to be very aware of when they're getting advice. Is their advice that they're getting, is it steeped in, is it covered with trust and honesty and integrity and quality and value? So, and when I say those terms, I mean those are big terms, not just quality or value for me, but is this quality and value something big that anyone could take part in? Is this something that this is at the expense of breaking trust with somebody? You know what? You should go ahead and just quit that job and say heck to that boss and just go do your own thing. Well, in the meantime, you blew trust with maybe somebody that you had a relationship, your old boss, and now you're just jumping ship for new money. And there's a time and a place, but you better take that into account. Good advice is covered in good values. And if it doesn't cover your value bridge, then you probably want to think twice about, I don't know. An example could be like, I want to value family. So here I am getting advice about a job situation, and this job situation is going to take me further away from my family. In other words, I may not have as many hours at home.
Sure.
But it's a great job. It's a great job. Money, everything, experience, it's going to be great. But it's the value it takes is my family. No, that's not maybe the advice I want to consider. So good advice is always steeped in great values.
Yep. One thing that I really like about, those traits you were talking about, when you are seeking out advice, I would really recommend that that the person you are seeking out, you know this person and you know the type of value system that person holds. Because if that person, if I'm seeking someone out for marriage and they've been divorced 4 times over, not to say that they don't have something to add, I mean, they can probably teach me what not to do, right? But I also think, man, you should know the people you're seeking out advice from. So, and that's very difficult now in the world. We have our phones, we have social media. You can go on any social media platform and find someone who wants to give you advice on anything. Right. But if we don't know that person, we don't know the value system that person holds them to, they may not align with our own value system. So you may be getting advice that works for that person, but you personally, just like you were talking about with the work thing, if that person is telling you, to value certain things in your work world, but then it's taking you away from your family life, and we know family to be, so much more important than our work, like, man, maybe those value systems don't line up.
Yeah. I have a friend who used to talk about when he would meet with a financial advisor or somebody that was in the world of trying to direct you to do better with your finances, his first question always was, and he's pretty bold, his first question
Can I see your bank statement?
Yeah. What is your net worth?
Yep.
What is your net worth? And if their net worth was less than his net worth, he'd say, let's go have coffee.
Yeah.
This meeting's done. Let's just go enjoy each other's company.
That's so true, though.
Yeah, because basically, and it's not to take away from that person, but you want, like you said, like, I'm not going to get marriage advice from somebody who's got 3 or 4 divorces under their belt.
Yeah.
Okay, it doesn't mean the guy who's never been divorced has a perfect marriage.
Very true.
But he's leaning towards a better side of having it right.
Yes. I like it. So let's talk about this idea of seeking advice. This thing, I'll let you kind of kick this off. This idea when we look for 3 different sources, I think these are 3 great kind of takeaways, little nuggets we can take away from this talk.
These are 3. Remember, when I'm seeking advice, I've got to make a decision on something. I have 3 different areas that I want to go to. All right. And they're in this order, and I put them in this order in particular in terms of the value that I'm going to place on them. Okay, maybe not necessarily the timing, but the value of, like, okay, this one I'm going to give a heavier score than these other 2. Okay, the first one is I want to seek advice from people who are current experts through experience. Okay, in other words, like, I'm starting to think of you now as you're coming into being an expert, a current expert in the firefighting world, okay? Because of your age and your experience. And now, you are currently doing this for a living. And so you are one of the first guys, if I'm wanting to learn more about firefighting or getting into the fire safety world, like, okay, I'm going to go to Kyle first or somebody in that sort of circle, okay?
Yes.
The important part here is who's getting their experience or their expertise through their experience. Man, we discredit this all the time. And I learned this from my dad. My dad was a mechanic, and he was a good mechanic, all right? And he could pick an engineer out, a book-smart engineer. He could pick him out from a mile away.
Yeah.
Because book-smart engineers, I'm not taking away from their smartness, okay? But their ability to actually then get into that engine or the mechanics of that car, he'd be like, that guy does not have a clue. And he would look at their hands, because my dad's hands were always beat up and greasy and dirty. And he'd look at their hands, he's like, he doesn't even know how to use his hands. Yeah. I'm not going to listen to him at all, right? And so he would dismiss him. But that did educate me to say, go to the people who are actually doing it. Yeah. Those are your first source.
Yep. So with that, again, just going to my experience in the fire world, this is something, because I do travel and we go to different trainings, and we do get to hear from different guys and they've been exposed and experienced different things. It is very difficult sometimes, because I know the experience and exposure I have where I work. I'm very fortunate. I work for a department that we are very aggressive and we see a lot of fire. And so when I put those 2 together, and then I hear someone who works for a department that doesn't go to as many fires as I do, it's hard for me to say that person is very book smart. They've gone to a lot of trainings, and this is kind of that, because I do see it a lot. I still want to better myself and go to these trainings, but I'm also very particular about the trainings I'm going to, because I want to seek out that current expert. I want to go to someone who is working for the St. Louis's or the Baltimores or the departments that are actually going to more fires than I am. I just similar to what you're talking about, going to a financial advisor. necessarily like I'm going to ask what their net worth. I want to see someone who goes to more fires than I do. But it was also this idea. So I would it's very hard for me to go seek advice from someone who works in the suburbs. Not that they don't know what they're talking about, but their exposure to fires. They have new construction. Where I work, I don't have everything I have is 1940 and before.
Right.
So it's hard for me to learn experience from a fireman who has current modern construction where I have older construction. So it's hard for me to take that advice because what I seek in an expert and someone who's an expert in our field, I want someone who works for St. Louis because that's an old city.
Yeah, good stuff. The next person I want to go to is an old timer, all right? And so he won't listen to this show, but my father-in-law,
okay,
especially anything in the construction world.
Yeah.
He hasn't done construction in 20 years, but he knew every phase of construction. He owned his own company. He did it from foundation up to the top, and he just has so much wisdom and he will, even because he knows he's been out, he will say, well, here's what we would have done back in my day. And I love that because he sets up, this is how we thought through things back then.
Yeah.
And if it's good, it's always good, right? Like, in other words, if it was built in trust and integrity and all these things. And so I love to pick the brain of the old timer because they've got the experience, even though they may not be cutting edge on what is current today.
Well, I want to take it a step further. This idea of the old timer, I think, is very true. I want to talk to an old timer who, in his old time, was the current expert.
Right. Yeah.
Like I want to talk to that guy who 20 years ago he was the bee's knees. He may not be up to date with on everything we currently do, but man, 20 years ago when he was it. Right. I want to talk to that guy because there's a lot of old timers at work that never really invested and really put a lot of effort into the fire service.
Right.
They were just there, right?
Yeah.
I want to talk to the guy who 20 years ago was belly deep in that fire. He knew what was going on, when it was going on. He was the current expert at that time. That's the old timer I want to talk to.
Yeah. And the third place we want to pull as an advice resource is from the new literature, the research, the media. Okay, like we are not saying no to that stuff at all because I've joked around so many times. YouTube has helped me build half of every project I've ever done, right? Like at least in the last 10 years. And so the idea here is, man, there is great stuff out there.
Absolutely.
And there's a lot of great experts in some of that work that can share their stuff, okay? So I am definitely going to look at that stuff. I'm going to glean through that. But just because I watch a YouTube video or I read a book on something, that does not make it expert level.
And it doesn't make you an expert either.
Right, yeah. I have to then go into application.
Yes.
And application
100%.
is a totally different game because you have to problem solve on your feet.
Yes, that we do this, as I go around and I actually teach in the fire service. We do this all the time. Hey, what was the last YouTube video you watched on the fire service? Like, what was a little trick and trade you did? Let's go try it. Let's see if it's got real world application because we can sit there and watch it. And if the first time you ever try it is in the middle of a fire, the fire don't care. What YouTube video you watch. The fire only cares about the fire only cares about destroying what it's on fire. So we do this all the time. Like, it's great. YouTube is a great thing. Watch it, absorb information, but then put it to the test. Put that YouTube video in front of an old timer. Put that YouTube video in an expert and say, what do you think about this? And see what they say. If there's an application to it, they should be open to actually looking at an experience. An old timer on YouTube, maybe not. You might get a little bit. You might get some naysayers there. But
I'm laughing as you're talking about that. You remember when Elon Musk was going to introduce the Cybertruck, the Tesla Cybertruck?
Yes.
And they came out and they were talking about how bulletproof this whole Cybertruck is going to be, and it's got all these tough panels, and the windows are indestructible. And was it a ball bat or something?
Think it was, yeah.
He takes a baseball bat and he's like, and look at these windows, and he slams the window and it shatters, and it's like, well, it said it was unbreakable. So the idea there, like somebody in a book said it was, but when we tried to apply it, it didn't work out quite as real world. Yeah. So again, that's all fun, but I want to actually test things, or I want people who have done that testing.
Yep. So kind of getting to the back end of this show, I think one of a great thing to obviously we're talking about when we're seeking advice, the things we should be looking for, and kind of placing value in certain things, and then that when we're looking for different sources, the type of sources to go to. But one of the ideas when we're talking about the advice part. Man, I think we talk about this all the time. It is very difficult to do most things when your emotions are high. So I think this idea of coming into a preconceived notions or having your emotions high, heightened level of emotions when you're seeking advice or giving advice, I think we really have to kind of check that at the door and realize that our emotions can really cloud our judgment.
Yeah.
They can almost cloud our advice we're going to be giving people. So I think when it comes to this advice part that we're seeking and giving, man, we got to realize that our emotions need to take a back step to that, and just have logical thinking.
Yeah, and sometimes when people come into me, they'll come in because they're in a very emotional, stressful time.
Yes.
And so they'll come in, and one of the things I'm assessing is before I go to give any advice, I'm trying to assess their level of emotion, because sometimes I have to say, let's just take a deep breath. Let's just calm down a little bit and let's try to think things through, because they're going to grab any little nugget you say, and the emotions will end up making the decision rather than the brain. So, yeah, that's a great point of checking your emotions at the door. Make sure that you have a process to settle yourself, especially if you have the time to do that. Settle yourself so that you can think things through logically, which kind of gets us to the next point of time. Like, one of the things that will make any of us make bad decisions are time constraints, especially when I like to think of them as artificial time constraints.
Okay.
When we say, like if I say, listen, no matter what, I have to build this house and have it done in 4 months. When I built this house, when I first started, I said to Linda, because I was a general contractor, I said, no time constraints, right? No, I just want to walk through this. Yep. I will be diligent. Now, a reasonable time constraint is fine because it kind of keeps you on task. But I didn't want anything pressing because I knew it would cloud up my decision making. And so we had been at it for about 4 months, and all of a sudden the bank was starting to talk about, okay, we need to redo this loan, get it ready to turn in. Yeah. It's going to cost us more money. And I give Linda grief for this, but I let her talk me into having 1 more month so that we could save money on the construction loan and before we converted it to a long-term loan. And that last month was miserable because now I was like, we got to do this. We got to do this. And I made bad choices. I got bad advice. And so I'm still cleaning up and nothing was big, but It was some cosmetic type stuff that I just pulled the trigger on. Yeah. And because all of a sudden we put an artificial time constraint on us that just was unnecessary. For the money that we saved in the month, I could have gone another month and we would have ended up saving more money by just doing it right. Yeah.
Well, I think the stress of time constraint really adds to the emotion. Then you can't check your emotion because you're so stressed. This next one I think is so true. This is something recently I have actually experienced myself. So, I'm trying to make a big decision in my career and where I'm going and what I want to do. And I sought advice from someone who's been around once or twice. He's in the fire world. And he gave me what I believe to be really good advice. But again, if I were to just stop there and take advice as the end all be all, we are all human.
Right.
Like, why wouldn't we seek advice, prayer, to God? Like, let's seek that advice. Let's go through the prayer process of actually like praying, like, okay, this is what I'm thinking. These are some of the things I'm hearing. Like, I promise you, God wants to be a part of these decisions. He wants to be a part of this advice that you're potentially giving or taking. Like, man, introduce him and bring him into this process of trying to figure out what the heck you're doing when it comes to seeking this advice. So again, kind of what we do once we had the advice, kind of as we're talking about this, man, prayer has to be a part of it.
Yeah, it's a huge part of it. And so how do I know that I'm getting an answer from God? And I think that's an important thing because a lot of guys want to pray, and then as soon as the prayer's finished, they want this little voice to be in their head and it says, okay, this is what you should do. And that's the Holy Spirit works by first knowing that you've given your heart over to the Spirit. And you are not going to press for the decision. You're just going to allow the Spirit to talk to you. And at that point, you let things start to go. And you just trust that the Spirit's going to talk with you. And you'll watch all of a sudden doors open and close right in front of you. And a lot of times ones that you didn't even think about. They open and they close, and it takes you down a direction that you go, oh, well, now it makes sense to me. And so part of our prayer is listening to the Holy Spirit, all right? And that's through nudges and just feelings that you get and instincts or other people talking into you. Like all of a sudden out of nowhere, somebody says, hey, Kyle, have you ever thought of this? And you're like we actually played golf with a guy the other day who really was giving you some information about job seeking. And your eyes were like, dude, like, this is the best golf trip I've ever been on because, like, you're telling me, and we did not have any of that planned beforehand. And he was speaking largely into you, and hopefully, you were hearing all that and going, wow, I never even thought I'd be talking about this today.
Yep, very true. Yeah, this last little point I think is so true, man, that we've done a whole show on this. Like, man, once you seek advice and you're going to take it or leave that advice, man, once you've made that decision, like, we can't have regrets in that, right? We have to take what we do, we have to own it. So this is a decision I'm making, and the idea of just constantly looking back and saying, man, did I make the right decision? That's kind of working through that process of checking the emotion at the door, making sure your emotions don't cloud your judgment. Hopefully there is no time constraint when it comes to trying to make that decision. Going through the prayer portion of it and actually, seeing what God is telling you. And then once that decision is made, you have to be, the decision has been made, so let's move on from it.
Yeah, stick to your guns and go, right? And sometimes people think they make a decision and like, well, I've made the decision, so I hope it works. Well, God doesn't just leave you at the door of that decision. Even if you took a new job and it didn't work out, and then people go like, oh, it was a wrong mistake. No, like, there's something in there for you to learn, something for you to glean out of that. And so God just doesn't leave you. He continues to say, no, here's where we're going to go. Here's another door that will open. Proverbs 3, 5, and 6. Proverbs 3, verses 5 and 6. Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways submit to him, and he will make your path straight. What a great reminder. And I mean that, like, that's just not like a cliche. At the end of the day, you're going to take advice from people. You're going to have to make decisions. Sometimes it's going to be confusing. And at some point in time, you have to take a deep breath and you just have to step back and you got to just trust that Christ is going to carry you through these.
I love it. Yeah, man, I hope this show kind of hit home for you guys. If you're going through something, you're seeking advice, wanting advice, or you're the one giving advice, man, go back through the show, listen to it. Hopefully something kind of rings true for you. I know, if you're seeking advice when it comes to marriage and family, look at this plug, right? If you're seeking advice or you need, someone to come alongside you and hopefully give you, biblically based advice, man, seek out Rock Solid Family. I know Merle and Linda would love to come alongside you, help you in whatever struggles you're having, whether it's in your marriage, whether it is in your family, whether you need to work out on Saturday mornings with Merle, like I probably should,
I'm not dragging you there. Forget it. I'm not giving you any more advice on it. As long as you can hit a golf ball farther than me, I don't really care how good a shape you're in.
So reach out to Rock Solid Families. I know they would love to come alongside of you and help. If there's anything we can do here at Strong Dads, we would also love to, come alongside. If there's topics you want us to dive into, we would love to do that as well.
All right, so we want to thank all of our listeners for listening. Please give us those 5-star ratings. We just love our numbers are starting to grow again. It seems to plateau and then jump and plateau, and so really cool to see that. And a lot of that is just hopefully messaging that you guys think is valuable. Please pass it along. Also want to thank Casey's Outdoor Solution and Kreimer's Beer House for supporting the work that we do here at Strong Dads. So why don't you go ahead and give some good advice and sign us off.
Sign us off. Go out there and be some strong dads. Hey, this is Kyle Crawford from Strong Dads. Strong Dads podcast would love to thank the Kreimer's Beer House for coming alongside of us. The Kreimer's Beer House was started in 1982 by the Kreimer family, and since that time, they have definitely become a Cincinnati favorite. So if you're looking for an incredible meal in an incredible setting, definitely go down to Route 128 and check out the Crymer's Beer House.